Okay guys, today I thought let's test the GTX 1660 Super in Mortal Shell 2 and see how this 6GB GPU handles the game at 1080p and 1440p. By the way, the 1660 Super is below the game's official minimum GPU requirement, which is an RTX 2060 Super or RX 6600. So I'm interested to see how playable it can still be with the right settings. So I started with 1080p high and native rendering, while fighting enemies to see what kind of performance I could get without using any upscaling. Around 34 FPS is the estimated average here, and I wouldn't expect a locked 60 FPS at these settings. The 1660 Super is already working quite hard with the game's detailed environments. Next, I tested FSR quality while keeping the high settings in place. I was fighting enemies during this test, so I could see how the GTX 1660 Super handles combat with the extra performance from upscaling. The estimated average moves up to around 44 FPS, making 1080p much more practical. For me, quality would be the first option to try when I want a better balance between clarity and performance. I pushed the upscaling further with FSR Performance, while fighting enemies to see how much extra performance the GTX 1660 Super could gain. The estimate reaches around 51 FPS, which gets much closer to the 60 FPS target. The trade-off is a softer image, so I'd use this mode when performance matters more than sharpness. After that, I moved up to 1440p native with high settings. The extra resolution makes the workload much heavier for the 1660 Super. The estimated average drops to around 24 FPS here, so native 1440p isn't something I'd recommend for this GPU. The higher resolution looks better, but the performance cost is simply too high. I then tested FSR quality at 1440p to give the GPU some help while keeping the high graphics settings.
Your shell serves you as a brother.
The estimated average rises to around 32 FPS, which is an improvement over native. I'd still consider this more suitable for players who value the higher resolution over a high frame rate. For the last test, I used FSR Performance at 1440p while fighting enemies to prioritize frame rate over image quality and see how much smoother the gameplay could become. The estimated average reaches around 40 FPS, which is much better than native. The softer reconstruction is more noticeable, so I'd personally stick with 1080p on this GPU. After checking all these combinations, 1080p is clearly the more comfortable resolution for the GTX 1660 Super. Native works as a baseline, while FSR gives me more performance to work with. At 1440p, even the faster FSR mode doesn't turn this into a high FPS experience. If I were using this GPU, I'd focus on getting the best 1080p settings instead. One thing to keep in mind is that the 1660 Super only has 6 GB of VRAM in a demanding game like this. Memory capacity can become another limitation alongside the GPU's raw performance. For me, 1080p high with FSR quality is the setting I'd start with on the GTX 1660 Super. It gives me a better balance without pushing the reconstruction too far. If I really need more frames, FSR Performance is an option, but I'd accept the softer image. At 1440p, I would only use it if the higher resolution is more important to me. And honestly, this shows that the 1660 Super can still run Mortal Shell 2 despite sitting below the official minimum GPU requirement. You just need realistic expectations and the right settings.